Hi, my name's Chris Hall and I'm the marketing manager at FloodFlash. We're a commercial flood insurance company and we encourage resilience because we can give cheaper premiums to businesses and landlords that have flood resilience measures in place. We were founded in 2017 and we provide flood cover that's a bit different to the usual that people are probably used to. It's called parametric insurance or event-based insurance. And essentially what that does is that it measures the event itself rather than the costs of an event. So you're insuring against a flood rather than the damage that that flood causes. So what that means for customers or clients is that when they set up the quotes and when they set up the cover, they do two things. They choose the depth they want to insure against and then the amount they receive when a flood reaches that depth. And we use a proprietary sensor to measure flood depth at their chosen property. And then what that does is it sends us the data automatically. And as soon as a flood reaches their depth, they get the money straight away. And the benefit of that is it's really simple cover. It's really transparent. You know that when you receive a flood of a certain depth, you know that a payout is coming your way and you don't need to, fill out lots of forms or do any complicated loss adjustment procedures. And the other big benefit is that the claims are really, really fast. When Storm Kira hit in February, we were able to pay claims in 26 hours after the floods hit. So their floods hit on a Sunday afternoon, and by the Monday at the close of play, some of those businesses had already received those monies. Those that hadn't received the money, the reason why they didn't is because we were still waiting on their bank details. So this new type of insurance, parametric insurance, can open the way to really fast claims so that businesses can get up on their feet much quicker. We currently provide cover to the whole of the UK except Northern Ireland at the moment, but we're looking to expand in the near future. I was personally affected by flooding back in 2015. It was a flat, a downstairs basement flat, and there was sort of a lot of water runoff in the street, and I think the sewers were not particularly sharp at that moment in time, and the flooding came through the internal piping and through the systems, and the ground floor of the flat that we were in, just below ground level, so sort of basement, was inundated with about 1.5 foot of sort of fetid water. So woke up in the morning, swung my feet over the side of the bed and sort of plonked them into this sort of disgusting murky water at about 6:30 in the morning. And that was an absolute, catastrophe. And my flatmates that I was living with at the time and myself had to find alternative accommodation. And we never actually ended up getting the deposit back for that flat. For whatever reason, we tried to withhold the rent, but the landlord ended up taking our deposit off us, even though that we didn't find any alternative accommodation at the time. So, as a result of that experience, I'm really alert to the importance of flood resilience and being alert to those issues. In terms of attitudes to flood resilience, since I started working in this sector, it's interesting. It feels like awareness is going up slowly, but there are still big gaps in people's knowledge. And I think that the biggest one is people's understanding of flood risk and the way in which the industry articulates it, actually. A lot of people still talk in terms of return periods. So they talk in the terms of a flood being a 1 in 100 risk or a 1 in 20 year risk. And the issues with that, I think, are that people tend to equate those times with, a frequency. So a 1 in 100 year flood, if they think that they've had one in the last 10 years, that might mean that they're not, liable to flood in the next 90 years. And obviously that's unfortunately not how the probability works. And they're just as likely to flood the following year as they were the year before. So I think that, the way in which that's communicated is perhaps not clear enough, but people's understanding of that doesn't help in the overall sort of understanding of what flood risk is, and obviously leaves people open to those catastrophic events when they do come around. As I say, there are changes though, and being in the insurance industry, those changes are becoming more obvious. Flood insurance is an interesting one in particular because it's often included in your household or your primary insurance if you're a business, and that's all well and good until it's not included. When an insurer finds out that you're at a significant flood risk, or you might have a claim that they decide that it's no longer worthwhile insuring you on flood. from a homeowner's perspective, the flood re-scheme that the government is carrying out is doing a really great job of making cover available for homeowners and residents. And basically, FloodFlash was intended initially to help plug the gap that was left in terms of commercial properties. So landlords and businesses don't have access to the flood re-scheme, but FloodFlash does. And I think between Flood Re and FloodFlash, we're doing, a significant job in helping to close that protection gap for people that can't or couldn't before get flood insurance. In terms of thinking about resilience and insurance together, one of the things that really sticks out to me is that people often think that resilience is a really large cost, and one of the things that's good about FloodFlash is that the higher the trigger depth you choose, the cheaper the premiums tend to be. So obviously we tend to spend a lot of time talking to customers and saying, well, your premium might be unaffordable at a lower depth at 20 centimeters, for example, but if you installed flood resilience measures up to 50 centimeters, 60 centimeters, then your premium is significantly more affordable. And in instances like that, the saving in premium can actually end up paying for the flood insurance or the flood resilience costs over the first few years. But further to that, resilience is often lumped together with, physical engineering and flood defences more specifically. And those tend to be quite large ticket items and very expensive. And actually, when you get into the sort of the flood resilience industry and you start to understand a bit more about it, actually there's significantly more cost-effective routes of doing that. So it might be just coming up with a really solid flood plan, or perhaps putting up your stock and your machinery on stillage so that it's higher up in the building and your property is immediately more resilient. So it doesn't need to be these large scale engineering projects. It can be something a lot simpler that can make your property or your business significantly more resilient in those instances. In terms of the future of flood risk management, I think there's probably three key things that I'd love to see. One is more people taking responsibility for their own property. I think there is a tendency to look at regional or national level flood defense plans and see it as someone else's responsibility to mitigate against flood risk. And actually, whilst there are lots of really great things happening at a sort of DEFRA level, and the EA obviously taking a lot of action there, when it comes to the crunch, you don't want to be left in a foot of water like I was, thinking that you could have done something about it, or you could have made yourself a bit more resilient in that instance. So, what I tend to try and think is, resilience is everyone's responsibility, including down to an individual property owner's level. The second one is I think more affordable flood resilience solutions in terms of those engineering pieces that we talked about earlier, but driven by changes in insurance. A lot of the time, insurance doesn't tend to reward people for installing resilience measures, and actually the only real tangible benefit is for the floods that are protected against. But actually, with new products like FloodFlash coming into the market, resilience measures are starting to be rewarded with cheaper premiums. I think that's only going to improve and make sort of resilience higher on the agenda for a lot of people. And I think that the upshot of all of those things is that when floods come around, you only ever really see the tales of woe, the really sad stories of people who have lost everything. And I think what the industry really needs is to see a few success stories. And I know from firsthand that a lot of them are out there, of people that have made their properties, their homes more resilient, but they often don't get into the mainstream media. And I think one of the things that would really help is to show people that understood their flood risk, took resilience measures out, and then benefited from them when a flood comes around. And so next time there is a flood, unfortunately as it will be, I'll be keeping my eyes really peeled to see those success stories, because I think that will really help people understand that something can be done, and you can take out measures that will keep you and your property safer in the future.